You ever wonder whether your paddle's gone bad or whether you need to replace your paddle? In this video, I'm going to share with you several factors that will help you determine whether your paddle's gone bad and give you some ideas on how to replace it. Stay tuned. Hello, my name is Tony Royd. I'm a master teaching professional as well as a senior pro pickleball player. In this video, we're going to be looking at several different paddles and giving you some ideas on how you can determine whether your paddle maybe has gone bad. And I'm also going to give you some tips on how to optimize your paddle to avoid damage to your paddle. At the end of the video, I'm going to give you some ideas on how to test your paddle, and then, if you need to replace it, on how you can demo some paddles to find your next awesome paddle. Let's talk about some factors that might affect the longevity of your paddle. To begin with, most major paddle manufacturers make good paddles. So the vast majority of these paddles that I have here, I have a Selkirk, a Paddletech, a Diadem, and a Revelin paddle. These paddles are going to be, generally speaking, well produced, well made. So you expect to have a paddle that's going to last you for some time. But there are some factors that can affect whether your paddle is going to have longevity to it. An obvious one would be any kind of impact to the paddle can cause damage to the paddle. If you have a paddle that's like this is a honeycomb core paddle. If you see an edge guard on it, usually that's an indicator that has a honeycomb core. Honeycomb core is basically just a material on the inside that has honeycombs in it, and that makes it light. If you impact this paddle, particularly on the sides like this, it's a cause for damage to the paddle and can impact the longevity of the paddle. Another factor you got to think about is how are you taking care of your paddle in terms of where do you store it? If you're storing your paddle in your car, it's like putting your paddle into an oven. Paddles are made from glue, right? There are a lot of glue components on the paddle that holds everything there, some sort of adhesive. When you keep your paddle in your car, what you're doing is you're allowing the paddle to potentially flex in the heat, potentially causing a separation of the glue on your paddle. That can definitely affect the longevity of your paddle. Another important factor is how do you play pickleball, right? Are you a hard hitter? If you're a player that's constantly mashing balls with your paddle, that's gonna make it a shorter life paddle. That's gonna shorten the life of your paddle. If you hit generally pretty soft and you play in a game that's kind of more a soft game with most of your players, absent some sort of impact to your paddle or something like that, your paddle is generally gonna last longer when compared to a hard hitting player. Speaking of paddle longevity, there's some things that you can do to extend the life of your paddle. You can see on this paddle here, we have some edge guard tape and things like that. Those are things that you can do that'll make the life of your paddle last longer. If you want to get our paddle optimization guide, I'll link to it in the show notes below and I'll put a card up here. Check that out. It'll help you optimize your paddle, not just to play better, but also to last longer. In a minute, I'm going to give you some tips to start figuring out whether your paddle's not playing the same as it did when you first got it. But first, let's talk about some things you can see on your paddle or look for on your paddle to determine whether your paddle is damaged and may be subject to not playing as well. First one I want to give you is an edge guard separation. Now, I'm not saying this paddle has edge guard separation. It does not. But these edge guards on these paddles are there more than just for cosmetics or for the look of the paddle. They actually hold everything together. Think of it like holding like a vice grip, if you will, like holding everything else together like a sandwich. If you have edge guard separation anywhere on your paddle, what will happen is the paddle won't play as well because it doesn't have the structural integrity that it needs. So when you see a paddle, if your paddle starts to separate around the sides of the paddle, consider that you might need a new paddle. Now, if you have a paddle like this Selkirk paddle that doesn't have an edge guard, you don't have to worry about that because there is no edge guard to separate from the paddle. Another thing you can be looking for are dead spots in your paddle. What that means is you're hitting the ball, say you hit the ball here and it feels one way and here feels a different way. What that's an indication of is that this part of your paddle is becoming damaged, whether because the inside has gotten cracked a little bit, the core, or you have some separation on the face here. So if you find that your paddle plays differently in different parts of your paddle, then that's a sign that you may need to replace your paddle. Now, if you're hitting them in the sweet spot and it feels weird, definitely a sign, but certainly look for differences in how the paddle feels on different parts of your paddle. This next one's not as easy to see in a paddle that's like this that has some graphics on it or color on it, but on some paddles, you can actually look through them and see the core. If you see your core is cracked, particularly on the edges, what that's going to tell you is that your paddle is probably starting to break down and it's time to start looking for a new paddle. Another thing you're looking for is face wear. So sometimes what happens is on this paddle here, you may be able to see it, there's a little bit of yellow there. Sometimes that'll indicate that the face is wearing down. Sometimes it's just dirty. In that paddle optimization guide that I mentioned earlier, we give you some tips on how to clean your paddle. So if you see marks on your paddle or something on your paddle, try cleaning it first. If cleaning it doesn't work, then it could be that the face is starting to get worn down and it might be time for a new paddle. Let me show you some signs that you can look for and how your paddle performs that'll help you identify whether your paddle needs replacement. Before we do that, if you enjoy this content, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Our channel is dedicated to helping you become the best pickleball player you can be. Let's talk about a couple of different ways that you can play with your paddle to determine that your paddle isn't up to snuff anymore. This is in addition to the visible characteristics from before. When you're out there playing with your paddle, look for the following. Number one, look at how your paddle, or hear how your paddle sounds. When you play with a paddle for a long time, you get to know how it sounds when you hit it. It starts sounding different. Start putting that red flag up, that radar up, that you're, wait a minute, I might need a new paddle. Combine that with, do you have dead spots on your paddle? Are you hitting balls in a way that, as before, they don't feel the same on your paddle, indicating a potential dead spot? That's another indicator. And then the last one I'm going to give you in this category is, if let's say you're hitting the balls and the balls don't go where you expect them to go the way they normally do. And an easy one here is the serve. When we serve, over time, we have an idea of how far the ball is going to go based on how we hit it. If the ball starts traveling usually less distance, it may be time to change your paddle. Another thing you can do when you're playing is, if you have a friend who has your same paddle, try that paddle. But if you have a friend who has a fresh paddle they just got, ask them, can I hit with it a little bit? See if the paddle feels different in your hand compared to your paddle. If there's a radical difference or a big difference between the paddles and how they feel and how they perform, it might be time to change your paddle. Common question we get asked is, when should I start thinking about getting a new paddle? How long do paddles last? That's a difficult question to answer because it depends on the factors I gave you earlier. How do you take care of your paddle? How do you play with it? Has it had any damage to it? Things like that. Most of the online resources tell you about a year to 3 years or a year to 5 years is how long a paddle lasts. Our recommendation is start at least thinking about it about 6 months to a year after you have your paddle, if you're playing regularly. So if you're playing regularly, about 6 months to a year after you have the paddle, start looking for signs that maybe your paddle needs to be replaced. We're not suggesting you to buy a bunch of paddles. We're not fans of having 22 paddles in our bag. But other than your shoes, your next most important thing that you need, a water bottle, that you need is your paddle. So having a paddle that's not playing up to snuff probably doesn't make sense if this is a major activity in your life. 6 months to a year, start looking into, maybe I need a new paddle. Once you decide to get a new paddle, you may want to try out some different paddles to see what they feel like and see maybe it's time not just for a new paddle in terms of replacing yours, but maybe a new paddle entirely. What you can do there is, our friends at Total Pickleball have an awesome demo program. I'm going to put a link in the show notes below. Check out our friends at Total Pickleball. Use our demo program. Get several paddles, try them out. At the end of the day, the paddle selection is yours. It's for you and not because somebody else is using it. So make sure you really like the paddle before you commit to it. I want to thank Patrick Shea for posing the question that led to this video. Is there something you're wondering about pickleball? Put it down in the comments below. Let us know that there's an area that you're wondering about, you have a question about. We'll try and answer it either in the comment. We always do that. And if it's a big enough topic like this one, we might even make a video. Again, if you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing to the channel, hit that like button, and we'll see you next time.